Have you ever heard rain that feels alive? Not just falling from the sky, but knocking, tapping, like it's trying to get in. I didn't believe it either, until that night in the cabin. Now, every time it rains, I hear it again. The rhythm, the message. And I know it's still waiting for me. If you think you're safe just because you're inside, you're wrong. It's always been inside.
It started the way these things always do. A group of friends, me, Anna, Marcus, and Dylan, looking for a weekend escape. Dylan found the cabin online. It was cheap, secluded, and nestled in the heart of the woods. The pictures made it look charming, almost cozy. A little too cozy, maybe. The first sign came on the way up the mountain. We stopped at a rundown gas station to grab some snacks, and that's where we saw him. He was sitting by the window, staring out at the rain streaking down the glass. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and dark circles under his eyes. When we walked past, his gaze snapped to us, sharp and almost predatory. "You're going up to the cabin, aren't you?" he said. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in days. Dylan laughed it off, of course. "Yeah, how'd you know?" The man stood up so suddenly that even Marcus, who was built like a linebacker, flinched. "Don't go. Don't even get near it. When the rain starts, it'll already be too late." Anna shifted uncomfortably, clearly unnerved, but Dylan just rolled his eyes. "All right, thanks for the tip, buddy," he said, brushing past him. The man grabbed Dylan's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "It watches. It listens. When it knocks, it's already chosen you." Dylan wrenched free, muttering something about lunatics in the middle of nowhere, and we left. But as we drove away, I glanced back. The man was still standing there, watching us, his lips moving silently as if repeating a prayer or a warning. The rain started the first night. At first, it was a welcome addition. Cozy white noise as we gathered around the fireplace. We drank, played cards, and told stupid ghost stories. The cabin felt warm and inviting, the kind of place where you could forget the world for a while. Until Anna froze mid-laugh. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. We all stopped, straining to listen. At first, it was just the rain on the roof, a steady patter. But then there it was, a faint tapping, slow and deliberate, like someone rapping on wood. "Probably a branch," Marcus said, though his voice wavered. "No," Anna insisted. "It's coming from inside." We split up, pressing our ears to the walls. The tapping seemed to move, shifting from one corner of the cabin to another. It wasn't until we ended up in front of the attic door that the sound stopped altogether. "I'm not going up there," Anna said, stepping back. Dylan grabbed a flashlight, ever the skeptic. "Relax. It's probably mice or something." He climbed the stairs, his flashlight beam bouncing against the wooden walls. "What do you see?" Marcus called out. At first, there was silence. Then Dylan's voice drifted down, hollow and distant. "There's writing up here. It says..." I waited. That was when we heard it. The tapping again, louder this time. It wasn't coming from the attic. It was coming from the front door. We all froze. The tapping turned to knocking, a steady, deliberate rhythm that matched the rain. Slowly, Marcus crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. His face turned pale. "There's someone out there," he whispered. Anna grabbed my arm. "It's him, the guy from the gas station." She was right. Standing in the rain, drenched to the bone, was the man from earlier. He wasn't knocking anymore. He was just staring at the door, his eyes wide and frantic. When we opened the door, he stumbled inside, shivering violently. "You didn't listen," he rasped. "You stayed? What the hell is going on?" Dylan demanded, coming down from the attic. The man, Sam, he said his name was, glared at him. "The rain doesn't just fall here. It calls. And when it calls, you can't leave. What does that even mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But before he could answer, the cabin went dark. The fire died, The lights flickered out, and we were plunged into silence. Then the tapping started again, louder and faster, coming from every wall, every corner. "It's here," Sam whispered. What happened next was chaos. The tapping turned into pounding, and the cabin shook with the force of it. Anna screamed, and we all bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. "We have to run," Sam said. "Into the woods. Now." We followed him, crashing through the rain-soaked forest as the pounding faded behind us. But we weren't alone. Something moved between the trees, tall, impossibly thin, its limbs twisting in ways that didn't make sense. Lightning flashed, and I saw its face, or what should have been its face. Instead, there was just a smooth, featureless surface, tilted as if it were listening. We didn't stop running until we reached the road. When we looked back, the cabin was gone. Not just dark or distant gone. Sam stared at the empty space, his face pale. "It doesn't let go," he said quietly. "Not really." We never saw Sam again after that night. After we reached the road, we stood there, drenched and trembling. The rain soaking through our clothes, clinging to our skin like icy fingers. None of us spoke, our breathing ragged and loud against the deafening hiss of the storm. I turned to Sam, hoping, praying, that he would have some kind of explanation, something that made sense. But he just stared into the darkness where the cabin used to be, his eyes wide and distant, his lips moving silently, like he was reciting a prayer only he could hear. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and hoarse, barely audible over the rain. "It doesn't let go," he murmured, more to himself than to us. "Not really. You might think you've escaped, but you haven't. You can't." "What are you talking about?" Anna's voice cracked, her desperation cutting through the storm. Sam's gaze flicked to her, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like pity in his eyes. Then he turned to me, his expression hardening. "You'll see," he said. "Sooner or later, you'll see." He stepped back into the shadows of the forest, the rain swallowing him like a curtain falling on a stage. I shouted after him, my voice breaking, but he didn't turn around. The last thing I saw was a silhouette, barely visible in the storm, before it melted into the night. And just before he disappeared completely, his voice came back to us, low, raspy, and laced with something I can only describe as finality. "It wasn't the cabin that waited," he said. "It was the rain, and it always knows where you are." The words hit me like a cold blade, slicing through the fleeting relief of our escape. Marcus grabbed my arm, shaking me. "We need to go. Now." But I couldn't move, couldn't stop staring into the void where Sam had been. His words echoed in my mind, twisting and expanding until they became unbearable. We drove down the mountain in silence, the rain hammering against the car, the rhythmic tapping on the roof almost unbearable. By the time we reached the edge of the forest, the rain had stopped. The air was still, suffocating. None of us spoke about it again, but deep down, I think we all knew the rain would come back. And when it did, it wouldn't just be falling from the sky. It would be waiting,